Hi, I'm Sherri.
I'm Lana.
And this is Real Estate Tips with SNL.
Hi, Sherri. It's so good to see you again.
I know, it's been so long.
We're going to talk today about buyer agency.
Yeah.
And we know that there's been a lot of talk. The future of real estate transaction has been in the news.
It has been.
Social media everywhere. Okay. On March 15th, NAR reached a proposed settlement agreement to end litigation to broker commissions, subject to court approval, obviously. So we're going to just dive into this right now.
We are. And excuse us as we're for those that are watching as we look at our notes, because there's a lot of information here, and we just want to share with you what we're picking up, what we're learning, what we're researching.
Right.
So I thought it would be fun if we take a look at the history of buyer representation.
Roll back in time.
So I did. So like any good Google person, I ended up on Wikipedia. So yeah. and so this I thought was really cool. Was 1983. I feel like that year keeps coming up. It is the year I graduated high school.
I was going to say, did you graduate? 83. Okay.
In 1983, a Federal Trade Commission study revealed that more than 72% of home buyers in the United States mistakenly believed that the agent who was showing them homes was representing their interests. Now, this is a common misconception back in the day. But what would happen is at the time that listings were put together, a home seller and a listing agent would sign a contract, and they would do it for X amount of commission.
Yep.
In fact, I would say higher than what we typically see today. And that was the only contract that was in existence. So brokerages had a duty of responsibility to the home seller. And then there were agents and there were sub-agents, and the sub-agents could be showing properties, but they weren't necessarily buyer's agents. So when this was revealed, it just sort of opened up this whole, new opportunity, new world, if you will. So I had spoke to somebody who is our former manager, who had sort of talked about how back then they used to say that anything that happened in California would eventually be like the wave that came across the country and would land in the East Coast. So back in California, buyers wanted representation.
Right.
And what was most likely their most important investment in their lives. And so back in California, there was an entrepreneur who opened up the first exclusive buyer brokerage and opened it up in Arizona. And then it was turned into a franchise. And that company was later called the Buyer's Agent Incorporated. And I thought this was so fascinating that also out in California is where my father lives. And my dad, Keith King, I'll give a little plug to him.
There you go.
I called him up and I asked him if I could interview him, and which he, of course, loved. And it's been a number of years. My dad, he has worked, in his career. I mean, he's long since retired now. But when he was working, a lot of his job titles had some sort of financial advisory type of role to it. And it's changed depending on, what he would tell me that it was often, tax shelters. They did a lot of real estate tax shelters. And he was so into this. But then in 1986, that was the Tax Reform Act. So there was no more tax shelters. Right. And he's worked for, the Foster Group. He worked for Mass Housing, Boston Financial, and a whole bunch of them. I mean,
he's smart.
He is smart. He is smart. When I was applying to colleges, I wanted to, major in business because I thought my dad was so smart, and I wanted to be like him. And I said, so what is business? And I still don't know. I still don't know. But, I do remember that he was involved in all of this.
That's great.
Now, we lived out in Linfield, so we were in the North Shore, and in the early 1990s, my father was approached by John Kennedy, who owned this small brokerage, not the Kennedy family,
not the Kennedy.
No, he owned this small brokerage in Linfield called Northrop Associates, and they were a traditional brokerage. And if you can imagine, in the 1990s, you had this Federal Trade Commission study back from 1983. So all of this was starting to become, making its way from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Yep.
And, John said to my father, I think I'd like to open up a buyer brokerage, an exclusive buyer brokerage. And he wanted to partner with my dad. And so my dad, I know, right?
He started all of this?
So, well,
on the East Coast?
Yeah, I don't know if he started it, but he certainly joined in on it.
Wow, that's great.
And it was pretty cool. Yeah. I remember my father did all this research, and I feel the same way. I like to research things. So maybe I do get that from him. Yeah, I know. I did this here. And he talked to buyer agency firms across the country, and they eventually joined a franchise, and it was called the Buyer's Agent Incorporated. Now, I didn't know this. I had already looked up Wikipedia when I called my dad. And when he mentioned the same name, I thought that was so cool, right?
Yeah.
So it was a small office. The franchise provides like booklets and materials to help them market themselves and give them more information on working the buyer side of a transaction. They had a little office. It was like 4 or 5 people in it. And their slogan, he says, I still remember our slogan. It was guaranteed to save you money. I said, I don't think we can say that today.
No. Oh my God.
Our hands get tied a lot on these things, but
guaranteed to save you money.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now one of the agents in his office was this guy, Len Ham, and he was also a WBZ radio host. Okay. And his radio name was Len Thomas. And he had narrated an ad on cable TV. He had the voice for it, right. And that actually got them some buyer leads. And then they would run some seminars and did typical things like that. But they're trying to get the word out. Now, I'm going to take a quote from my dad. And he said, and I quote, "Any change is met with resistance." And this was something that was definitely the case with traditional brokerages and, buyer brokerages. So he says it wasn't easy being the pioneers for buyer agents. He loved working with buyers. He is the financial guy. He's always running the numbers. Even in his retirement, I think he joined for the condo association. He joined the board as the treasurer. He's just always looking at numbers and thinking finance. And he really, in the research, he wanted to learn as much as he could about a property. So he said it was a job that he definitely had a passion for. Yeah. They didn't have a lot of success. They only lasted, a couple of years or so, and then I think there were just some changes that occurred in the real estate world where the exclusive buyer agency wasn't as needed as more traditional brokerages just offered both.
Right.
But we bought our first house in 1997, and my father has told me, make sure you get a buyer's agent. So we did do that.
So let's just backpedal a little bit, Sherri. You just gave a lot of background. So let's just repeat what you said. So sub-agents, list agents, anybody in real estate was working for the seller.
Yes.
But the consumer thought that when they spoke to an agent, that was their agent.
Correct.
They were right. So I remember talking to an agent that's been in the industry for quite some time, well more than I and you together. She had told me that it was sub-agents. Friday, they would real estate agents would get all the listings sent to them. Sunday, the Sunday paper went out. They would get calls Sunday. The consumer would say, we need the address for this place we just saw in the paper. And the agent would say, come on in. And the agent would come in, the consumer would come in, meet the agent. They'd get in the car and then they would go to the place. Or she said with the list of buyers that were there, she would call up the buyer and saying, hey, come meet me at the office. I have a property to show you. And they would go. So they were still working for the seller at the time.
They were. I mean, I think they were certainly wearing a hat that appeared to be a buyer, representation, but their loyalty laid with the seller.
Correct. Because obviously they saw this listing and they wanted to sell it. So now your dad comes into play, opens up, advocates for an agency, a buyer agency place. It doesn't kick off that great, right? But obviously the consumer still hasn't really heard about it, right? Because it didn't kick off right away. But when it did kick off, now we have agency created for the buyers where now they're going to have exclusive representation, and no longer is it going to be a sub-agent working and calling up and saying, hey, I'm going to go show you this property. They're actually working for the buyer now.
They are. And I spoke with somebody also who was licensed and worked back during those days. And that person told me that coming from the traditional brokerage side, the side that my father would say, that they felt like they were on opposite ends. And she had said it definitely felt adversarial, that suddenly their role was to come in and, they're trying to research the property. They're trying to advise their clients and learn as much, but maybe the approach was more like a bull in a china shop than, let's talk this over. What can you share with me? And again, change, resistance, it was difficult. One of the things that this person shared with me was that eventually NAR, the National Association of Realtors, had, created some training for buyer agents. Yeah. And when that was, put into play, I think that it really changed things because now it was more common. People were aware of it. And, and I think it made it so that both sides could work in a way that, even though our loyalty is with our clients, we're working together to get the information out so that both sides can make an informed and educated decision on the most important investment in their lives, most likely.
This is really interesting because, the whole quote from your dad, there has been change. And I think the general public needs to understand we don't have set stone formats year after year after year. Real estate is a constant change, constantly. So whether we're working through some changes as buyer agency come and play, or we get hit with a pandemic, or we get hit with some kind of financial crisis, we are constantly changing and constantly adapting. So as agents, it's constant education that we're doing, where I think sometimes the consumer doesn't see that. They just think that this is what the status quo is year after year after year. But we are constantly changing in the industry.
Right.
Constantly.
Well, you were talking, back then there was an MLS book. The book was the one that I think what you were told was, what was it, the Fridays, and, then it would be in the newspaper. And certainly things have changed. Right. There was computers, but this was before internet. So it was, but then internet comes along. So now buyers are feeling like, okay, instead of me relying on my buyer's agent to tell me about a property, I have all of this technology that gives me addresses and photos and information. Right. And, so what do I need my buyer's agent for?
Right. That's what I was going to say. I see comments sometimes of like, I did all the work and whatnot. So I really think that, sometimes the consumer doesn't really understand what we do as a buyer agent.
And, in a way, I think kudos to us if we made our job look easy.
Right.
Because it's not. And
are you sure? Yeah. I think we just, collect, we just keep going, and we get top producer, and we just keep doing this day in and day out, and we just have to show up in our fancy cars and our beautiful clothes, and try to fit everybody in, and that's just what we do.
Right. That's it. It's easy.
Yeah.
Easy. So, it's funny because change made it easier for the consumer. Technology made it easier for the consumer to research properties and, and perhaps even dig a little deeper. They can find out when it was last sold. They can, they can see if there's building. I would say permits been pulled, things of that nature. So a lot of that is readily available to buyers with the information that's out there. And I think that's certainly helpful. But what technology also did is it put agents on a need of availability much more than in the past, where, we're not waiting for the buyer to make an appointment, show up to your office, hop in your car and go for a ride. You're getting a phone call or a text, and it's a 7 days a week job. Right. And our families have to learn to adjust to the fact that we are always on call.
Right.
Did you show a property Easter Sunday?
Yes.
So, okay.
Easter Sunday.
And writing up offers and doing things of that nature. Right. But there's more to it. And I mean, that still is simplifying things. Yeah. You work 7 days a week, cry me a river. There's, there is more to it than that.
Yes.
I feel like when a buyer has trusted me to be their buyer's agent, then I have a loyalty. It's like they're my children, even if they're older than me. I've pulled them in. I'm going to protect them. I want to make sure that we are getting through this in a way that prepares them for what lies ahead. All right. So what is buyer agency? Do you want to read
What
that?
is it? I'm going to read it.
Read that.
So, a licensed real estate agent who agrees to work on behalf of the buyer. There is fiduciary responsibilities, and NAR created Old Car.
Yep, our acronym.
Right. And so, Old Car, I'm going to try to do it without looking at the paper.
Do you remember? I always could get like 3 letters.
Obedience, loyalty,
disclosure,
confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care and diligence.
Right, which is more than an R in Old Car.
Yes.
I want to tell them that, that's Old Car CD. I don't.
I got to think about this, though. I agree with you, the comment you just made. When I'm working with a buyer, it is a lot of legwork, and it's a lot of behind the scenes work. When we go look at a property, I'm trying to dig all the information about that property before we even go to the property.
Right. So
that we are prepared when we get there. And then when we get there, I'm like making my own mental notes or physical notes of like, oh, I better go check this. But how old's the septic system? Should I call the Board of Health? And, I'm writing all these things like, oh, we should go check this. Oh, is that a shared driveway? How is it shared? Oh, is there covenants? Oh, what is that, property in the back of the house? All this stuff is happening. It's not just opening a door.
Right.
It's not like, let's look at the furniture. We're never like that, right? I know that when a buyer walks through, they're like, wow, I can see myself living here. And I want them to have that. But I want to be their back person that's looking at the research so that I can get more information for them so that they're fully aware when they go forward.
Right.
And so I think that there's, for me, so much more that I want to do for them before we even put the offer in so they can feel 100%.
Yep. And we do develop relationships with our buyers. Yes. We spend a lot of time with them. We get to know them. They might be bringing along their children, or their family. You're taking an interest in their lifestyle and their activities. You want to make sure that everything is a fit. It's not uncommon for me to, feel like I've just added a new friend to my my friend group, and next thing you know, I'm inviting someone to book club, and and especially I love it when we get the relocation buyers, the people that have no knowledge
Right.
of the area,
Right.
and you've got a chance to, introduce them to a place that you've grown up and you know so well, and the things that you like about it. And I don't know, it's just it's emotional.
It's truly emotional, and I always work from my aspect is about lifestyle. You brought that up, and I always say, "Are you familiar with the area?" Even if they are familiar with the area, I love sharing what I like to bring to the table, which is recreation spots, right? And they might be on the same like mind, and they'll say, "Did you ever hike this place?" And I'll be like, I didn't. And so you are building relationships, but this is trust.
Yeah.
And so when we say loyalty, it's this trust that, I'm doing the best job I can to get you all the information, and, we're going to work together, and we're going to go through the process. I also want to share this. I teach a first home buyer class. And I know that sometimes when you're working with your client, they get a little nervous about asking questions because they think, oh, this is a dumb question, but
Right.
How is she going to feel? But the bottom line is there's no dumb questions, because everybody's individual transaction is completely different from the next. So when I'm teaching this class, I always say, anything, just throw it out. But because, we haven't developed anything yet, they think they're crazy questions.
Right.
But the crazy questions are the best.
Right.
Because that's everybody wants to know, like about this or that. So when I teach the class, it's about process. How does the whole process work? But then it's also letting them know what to ask a buyer agent.
Right.
Ask the questions, because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
So what do you ask? How do you interview? How do you go about it? I think it was so great when I started teaching this class, because it helps me when I'm talking with my buyers to interview them, but help them interview me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. As you talk about these questions, what's popping in my head?
Oh boy.
I like this one, has anyone died in this house?
Oh.
And you're like, well, the house was built in 1800. There's a pretty good chance.
Possibility.
that
And we
someone
may
has-
never know.
Right,
We may never
right.
know.
I don't mind the questions,
No.
and you know what? I want them to laugh at it later. Just ask. I'm probably going to ask something, that's silly, and I'm certainly going to say something silly. It's natural for me. It just comes out. I don't know, but yeah, I agree with you. We are so much more than just opening up a door.
Or throwing properties at them.
Right,
It's not
right.
about, check this one out on the internet. It's so much more. It's the way to engage, but we need to constantly engage so we can learn more about our
Right,
clients and get them into the house that they feel the best and most comfortable.
And they're, that set criteria that they give you at the beginning may change. We always hear the story of the person who wanted a single family home on 10 acres of land, and it had to have X, Y, and Z. And then they bought a condo in a development that had, 100 different units. And, so through the process, people are learning a lot about themselves as well, and what works for them. Right. And now we're in a market that is, we're navigating territory that is unknown. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we also have a situation where interest rates are higher than buyers are comfortable with. When they were super low, they were pre-approved for more money, and now some of them have been pushed out, and hopefully they'll be able to come back in.
Yeah.
We know it's expensive to buy a house. And, home values are also on the rise.
Constant.
And you've got what is currently a seller's market, but that could change. That could absolutely change. It's all based on supply and demand. So, a buyer, I believe, needs you more now than ever. Because oftentimes we are helping them think outside the box.
I was literally just going to say
Let's
that,
talk
Sherri.
about that
Think
box.
about outside the box. I was just waiting for that little, I'm going to dig in. Because the one thing that they don't have coming into this is they don't know how to think outside the box. Whether it is helping them think about the lending, coming up with some new programs that they come up with. We're hearing about it. Do they hear about it? No. Think outside the box as far as we just brought this up. They come to you for a single family. well, what if you could find a single detached condo that works better for them? What if they found a duplex multifamily where that works better for them? But they don't think that way because they're thinking, I need to get this, right?
Right.
But with us, it's really helpful. And even on top of that being currently a seller's market, helping them come up with some language so that their offer is considered
Right.
versus just ditched. So I think year after year, Sherri, I feel that buyer agents are so important now. Now, I have bought and sold several times. You've bought and sold several times. I have always hired an agent to help me. Have you?
Well, I'm kind of an agent.
I'm an agent, but I always had a second eye because
I've gotten advice. I feel like you and I spoke a lot, even when I was building, and getting some advice. Even when I was selling, is my number. Like, it's so easy to have an inflated sense of value because it's yours and you just need somebody. But now we're talking about buyers, not sellers, but still.
But also being a buyer ourselves, being in real estate, remember, our mind is still on something specific, right? Just like the consumer coming to us. We're on one, and we forgot to focus on everything because, we didn't put our real estate cap on because now we're a consumer buying, right?
Right.
So I've always needed that second opinion of the professional that's not engaged in what I'm in. We don't know the whole story. So I think it's so important. And you're right. With things changing constantly on the lending side, currently what's happening with values for properties, how do you get language to write in your offers? How do you monitor the dates of contingencies? How do you make sure you protect your deposit? We could go on and on.
Right. And quite frankly, you and I, we're seeing the inventory out there.
Right.
So even if I've seen a house with a buyer that it's not a match, in my head I might think, I've got a buyer that this would be perfect for, and it wasn't even on their radar.
Exactly.
Or, maybe we're looking at prices or homes that are in different price ranges where the values are all over the place. And because of that, we can easily identify a home that we've gone into that's, well underpriced or way overpriced.
Yep.
And we can help our clients understand the value of the home, and if they wish to pursue it, where their offer should, fall. I just believe we have a lot of value that it's far more than just opening a door.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel not only research, not only helping them prepare documents and watching dates and whatnot, I think we also bring to the table a team of professionals that help them along the way. Whether, it's our attorneys, our lender recommendations, us, home inspectors, contractors, people that can come in throughout the thing. Our team is there. They're not going to go hire individual things to get them to the table.
Right.
We're helping them with a full body of resource that we've cultivated to give to them that's going to help them with the best comfort.
Right. Now, do you work for free?
Negative. Do you?
I don't work for free.
No.
I certainly don't add up the hours. That would be ridiculous. But our compensation is handled at the closing table. So we could be working with buyers for months and months and months. In fact, you've got one that was how long that you worked with?
9 years.
9 years.
9 years I worked with someone.
I may have cut that person loose, but I'm just saying 9 years.
It wasn't consistently 9 years, but 9 years until we finally found something.
Yeah. Well, good for you for not giving up on that person and staying the course. But my whole point is, there's compensation that is paid. Right. And we do know that, in a real estate transaction, there's somebody who is selling something and somebody who is buying something. Yep. The buyer is bringing the cash to the closing table.
Yep.
The seller is going to have fees connected to the transaction. They have to pay tax stamps. Yep. They may have to pay an attorney. They have to pay recording fees. They are having to pay their listing office commissions. Now that listing side in their contract, now I can only speak for our contract. So at Coldwell Banker, our contract spells out specifically that the seller has agreed to pay X, and that from that X, we in turn will pay a cooperating agent or a buyer's agent. And that's how we're getting paid in this industry.
Yep.
And that only occurs when there's a closing.
Correct.
So is there motivation to find a house for a buyer? And naturally there is, but I don't want ever to just slap them in a transaction where they later have remorse, because we're building a reputation that we are protecting as well. And I don't want to sit here and say, well, it's all about me. But the reality is that if I haven't left my clients satisfied, it's going to come back and get me later. I don't want them just in a house so that we can close a deal and I can get paid. I want them to be in the house that fits them, so that they're happy. And they are comfortable referring me out to their family and friends and anybody who's looking to buy a home in the future.
Listen, I don't work thinking about the dollar. I work about giving the best service.
Yes.
I want to give the best service to someone because I expect that when I'm asking for it.
Yeah.
So what I would want, I'm going to work that way. So the dollar doesn't come into play. Of course, nobody wants to work for free.
No.
Everyone works hard. We work really hard. I mean, I'm on the clock 7 days a week, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is I like to give the best service in the fashion I would expect and I want to pay for. And I'm going to give that to the clients to get the same in return.
And
We're in a service. We're in a service industry.
We are. We're providing a service,
Yes.
100%, absolutely. I used to waitress back in the day. I was in high school. I had a job waitressing. Years later, when I started my family, I had taken a job waitressing, and I hate to say it, but I am also that customer that goes into a restaurant, and my husband's used to hearing me say this, empty hands, empty hands. They shouldn't have empty hands. When you walk by a table, it's full hands into the kitchen, full hands out of the kitchen. Never leave. I don't want this table to be filled with dirty dishes, and then you're giving me the check. Right. And I am critical of the service that I get in a restaurant. Now, what does that have to do with this? Well, simply that I expect that kind of service. And just like there are maybe good and bad people in the food industry, there are good and bad people in every industry. And sometimes the consumer just needs to do their homework and make sure that they're getting matched with an agent that's going to have those full hands in and out of the kitchen. So, and give them that service. We do have so many things available to us today. WebMD. Yep. If I'm getting a sore throat and my nose is running, or maybe that's a bad example because now I'm going to think COVID, but don't talk to me. But no, I have problems with my leg. I'm going to research it. And before you know it, everything is going to be spelled out. And by the way, it all ends with cancer and death.
Yes.
Every one of them.
Right. You're going to cut the leg off.
But maybe what I really need to do is go see a doctor. Right. And, maybe when I'm getting my taxes ready, I should go see the accountant instead of just popping them in the mail and waiting for the IRS to find my mistake.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes we need specialists.
Yes. And we want to be the specialist to help the buyer find the right house.
Yeah. So what does this mean for the future? Now, we don't know. We absolutely don't know. The proposed settlement does spell out a few things. One of which is, in my opinion, that we are losing transparency. And just bringing this up, when I spoke about the contract that exists between the seller and the listing agent, MLS, where the multiple listing service, where we put our listings, spells out exactly what the compensation is to a buyer's agent. And that was required to be visible. In fact, I think you used to be able to hide it.
You used to hide it.
Right. And there was a change
visible.
so that buyers know this, because we're working with a contract. And the contract says that the buyer is responsible for paying X to the agent that they're under contract with. And it's very easy for them to see that the house that they have viewed or want to view is including compensation to their agent.
Yep.
Now, the lawsuit that went out there was because there were home sellers who thought, I should not have to pay a buyer's agent to work against me. And in reality, I believe, I'm sure there's differing opinions, I believe that it's just a fee that's part of the transaction, that was, that buyer's agent bringing your buyer together and working to make sure that this is the right fit and we're going to make it to the closing table. Nobody's trying to sabotage anything.
No.
But we're also trying to be realists. So that MLS compensation is going away if this proposed settlement is approved. And if that's the case, the buyers no longer have that transparency.
No.
So how are you going to talk to your buyers?
Well, we are talking with them now anyways.
Yes.
With our contracts. We are explaining, hopefully everyone is, but I am explaining to them because one of the questions I teach my buyers, my clients, is how am I getting paid? Like I throw it out there right away.
Right.
I try to, I think it's so important for people to understand because we don't work for free, right? So how are we going to get paid is we're going to have conversation, but how is this going to affect them down the road? Who is it going to affect? Is it going to affect everybody? No, and it depends.
Right. We don't know.
We don't know.
Like I said, this is navigating unknown territory.
Right. But as of right now, we're still under contracts with our clients. We're still signing contracts. We're still discussing compensation, showing it's transparent, and that's where we are right now.
Right.
Right now, that's where we are.
One of the things to understand, and the reason that compensation to a buyer's agent has been handled this way in the past, or at least my interpretation of it, is because a buyer cannot finance, compensation to their agent. So when they're putting in an offer,
Correct.
and it's part of the transaction fee, and it's coming off of it, then indirectly they're paying the fee, or indirectly the seller's paying the fee. However anybody wants to look at it, the fee is part of the transaction, but it's not going to be a violation of their financing. So if a seller elects to not include buyer agent compensation, then a buyer potentially has to come up with additional funds,
which are not covered as a closing costs,
right,
or covered under anything like that. So that could be coming up with your down payment, your closing costs, and now the commission.
Right. I mean, I think
That
there's
could boot
a lot
of people out.
It absolutely could. I mean, and we know that there's, we can write them into the offers. We can come up with some, again, thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
We can think of some strategies, but we are, as an industry, change is met with resistance. And so we're going through this right now. The other thing is VA.
Oh, yeah.
VA financing is completely separate.
Yeah.
Now, this is, a program that is backed by the government. And quite frankly, I always hated that sometimes VA financing almost had this stigma attached to it.
Yeah. I agree.
There is pressure that the property has to qualify. Oftentimes, the buyer is putting, doing 100% financing, zero down. Yeah. And a lot of sellers have said, I'm not comfortable with a VA financing. But quite frankly, that is somebody who served in our military, risked their lives for us. And if that's the perk that they get, and now the government may potentially, the government's the wrong word here, but the program itself. So potentially what could happen is if we tried to put in an offer that, as part of the transaction fee, that compensation gets paid to a buyer's agent. That won't fly for VA. We can't do it for VA. So it's just another piece
that they get booted out again.
Right.
It's almost like it's not fair.
It's definitely not fair.
No,
and I don't.
Fair.
It's ugly. I don't like it. Okay, so this is depressing. So let's move on. This is depressing. My last piece on that is to talk about appraisals.
Yep.
So this was something that I had heard, and I would love to pick the brain of an appraiser. We need to bring an appraiser on here.
Here we
next.
go.
Absolutely.
We totally do.
And just how this is going to affect the appraisal world.
Yep.
Because if all things are equal,
Right.
and one home has included cooperating compensation as part of the transaction fee,
Yep.
and another home has not,
Correct.
is their appraised value the same or different? Because right now, there's transparency.
Yep.
But also if there's closing cost concessions, if there's seller paid or buyer paid upgrades, all of
Yes.
those things are listed in MLS. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. And I do see that, especially for the first 6 months to a year, this could potentially really throw a wrench in things.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. Yeah.
you know,
And I don't think we should think of it as, trying or depressing or it's going downhill and stuff like that. I think it's just
I'm resisting the change.
you are resisting it. You are totally not
Okay.
helping
okay.
this. But no, I think it's just conversations and questions for our clients to be open and just ask us. you know?
Right.
And I think right now we are still plugging along as we have been and working with what we currently have.
Right.
But I do think that this helps consumers to say, oh, okay, let's ask a question instead of maybe just listening what they're hearing one side
Right.
through other avenues and not talking directly to the real estate community.
Right.
I think that's really, really powerful that they come and ask me any questions. And frankly, anytime I meet somebody, whether they're looking to buy or sell right now, I ask them, what do you think? How do you feel? Because the more I can hear what a consumer is thinking about, the easier it is going to be for me to talk to my clients about. Because we're thinking real estate all the time, and we're
Right.
thinking, oh yeah, I know what to do, and this is what I have to make sure I disclose, or this is what I have to make sure I have to do. But we're not in the mindset of a consumer that doesn't have all this information that we do.
Right.
So it's really helpful when my past clients, my sphere, or people that know me, they give me their feedback on what they think is going on. I think
Right.
It's really helpful.
Well, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. I feel like when the NAR settlement, proposed settlement, wait, were we supposed to do this? Proposed settlement, when that came about, immediately every media outlet was putting it out there saying it is now going to be more affordable to buy and sell a home in the future.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, how did they get that from what was written here? Because that's not what I'm seeing. But they also don't work in our industry.
They don't.
So, to them, what they were reading, of course, you want to be attention grabbing, get the headlines, the clickbait, and all of that.
Of course.
So they're not interpreting the whole picture. And even we're struggling with understanding all of the intricate details that still need to be worked out. But I don't think it's as easy as change is going to equal savings. I don't believe that that's the case.
I think that I would love anybody out there to reach out to
Yes.
us
Yep.
for questions, for comments, for discussion. Because the more we all talk about it, the more we know what to bring to the community.
We're in this industry because we have a passion for what we do.
doubt.
Why else do we want to work 7 days a week? We love it. And truth be told, I naturally, just gravitate to it. I am constantly, checking on my phone to see, or, if I'm out. I know, I'm sorry. I know, but it's always there. It's always there.
Yes.
My phone is in the other room right now. As soon as we're done, I'm going to be checking it to see what's there. Checking MLS to see about new listings. It's fun.
Not even just because it's fun, it's because our passion and our desire to give the best service to our clients, because that's what we want. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss something because I'm not going to get the client. It's not about that. It's more about giving the best service possible.
I like making them happy.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. I want to give good news. I want to, sometimes we aren't delivering good news, and that's part of the job too. But, when that happens, then you're just going to get back out there and give it another try.
We always say we're going to go back for the next one. There's another one, and this one wasn't it, right? This wasn't the right one. So I really hope that from hearing this podcast that people will feel more comfortable asking questions and having discussions, and not just assuming, and feeling comfortable to call us for being their buyer agency, their buyer rep.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's new information coming out all the time.
All the time.
So even by the time this airs, we may have more information. So comment, reach out to us. We're at Coldwell Banker in Leominster.
Subscribe to us so you can hear all the new updated stuff, and ask us what you want to know.
Right.
We're happy to share any information that's available bring to you, but also don't be afraid to even just comment so we can think about some topics that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.